Pushing Back the Shadows, support and awareness for mental health. Hello and welcome to our Eating Disorder Awareness Week special episode of the Pushing Back the Shadows podcast. Now, I'm here with Cheryl today, and we're looking at the different eating disorders. And to help us do this, we've invited Hope Virgo, author of Stand Tall Little Girl, and ambassador for the Sure Mind Foundation, to come and talk to us about it. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hello, Hope. So, here with Cheryl, and we were going to talk to you a little bit about eating disorders, because that's one of the things that you really do talk a lot about, isn't it?
Yeah, so I struggled with anorexia from the age of 14, and over the last year have used my story to raise awareness, help fight that stigma, and also to educate people on what an eating disorder is, and kind of more widely on mental health and how you can manage your mental health as well.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the things that's kind of struck me about your story especially is how open you've been about it, because that I think is an item that a lot of people do struggle with. I mean, what would you say about that? What do you think?
So yeah, I think for me it was really important to be really open about everything. I thought that a lot of people paint this perfect picture of recovery, and it's not like that at all. It's really hard work, and it is a real challenge, and I think it's really important that people know that, and that people don't kind of think it's going to be really easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me it's very important to just keep talking honestly, and even when I have a bad day now, I talk very openly about it as well.
Yeah, I think that was, because obviously I follow you on Facebook as well, and I really admire how honest you are about it. I think it was the one post you'd put up, you were on holiday, you were eating something I could never even try, which was a fish, and it was like, oh, this is a struggle, and it was like, oh my gosh, but that's a very honest view of it, and it's trying to get across that point to a lot of people that recovery, whether it's from anorexia, from bulimia, from depression, anxiety, it isn't perfect. There's going to be bad days.
That's something we've said a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and I really loved the way that you were kind of like, I couldn't have done this a while ago, and it was a bit of a struggle, but I did it. And I kind of remember looking at that picture thinking, yeah, I still couldn't do that. And I have my own little, I've always said I don't have any kind of eating disorder. I just have a problem where I can't stop. So
maybe you don't like fish anyway.
Yeah. But it was really interesting to see that kind of honesty and saying, it's a journey. One of the things that we kind of wanted to talk to you about was, because obviously one of the things that I've noticed you're really trying to do is get mental health as part of everyday conversations. And one of the things that I've come across is that there are an awful lot of preconceptions about eating disorders. People assuming that it's just young girls, that it's attention seeking, all of these things.
You have to be thin to have an eating disorder.
Yeah, there's so many different ones. I mean, I'd love to hear your take on this and how you challenge that with people, please.
Yeah, no, definitely. So my biggest concern is around the concept that people have to have an eating disorder, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It really bothers me that, and I think that's one of the probably other reasons why I talk so openly about it, because through a lot of recovery, someone can be a completely healthy weight, but still have that anorexic mindset.
Yeah.
So it's really challenging for that, and it also means that people are less likely to seek out for support. They might get turned away from their GP or their mental health trust because they don't fit kind of the anorexic underweight criteria.
Yeah.
Massive one, definitely. And I think, that is kind of on that as well, actually. So, like, when you have an eating disorder, your mind gets so fixated on things like the calories that you're eating and trying to control everything. And when you're a healthy weight, people just assume that all of that's gone and that you've broken all of that cycle and everything's fixed. But it 100% hasn't. And people are going to struggle to kind of keep going forward. And it's so important that people know that just from looking at someone, you can't judge whether a person's struggling or whether they're 100% okay.
That's something that kind of translates across the whole mental health spectrum as well, isn't it? Because I've talked a lot about with depression, you put the face on. Because I used to work in a call centre and I'd walk in and nobody would know when I was on a bad day. They'd just kind of look and it'd be like, oh, yeah, he's fine, he's happy, he's joking, he's laughing. And it wasn't the case inside.
Yeah,
and I think that's why it's so important that whether when you're having a bad day, to have those people around you that you feel able to say that to and feel able to talk to about it. Because otherwise, you're going to kind of keep struggling on your own. And I guess putting on that mask every day when you're struggling with your emotions and feeling really rubbish is so draining and so exhausting that it's better to just tell someone so that someone can support you.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite interesting because obviously while getting prepared for the podcast, I've been doing quite a lot of talking to different people and, really exploring some of the aspects of this. And there was a lady that we've connected with via, I think it was YouTube. She's done a YouTube video for us. Yeah. And, one of the things that she actually said was, for her, she battles with anorexia, but she says, I don't look anorexic to people. And it was quite interesting to kind of look at that. And then I've had a discussion with somebody I work with within the office, and everybody always goes to her, oh, we love your figure, you look so beautiful. And she cannot see it herself, and she actually has issues with body dysmorphia. She cannot see how she actually is. And she's one of these people, she doesn't eat very much. I don't think she's ever been diagnosed as anorexic, but she, instead of doing the, perhaps starving herself or anything like that, she goes down the route of hitting the gym very hard, but refuses to admit that there's any kind of issue. And I think some of that, when I was talking to her about it, was that she was genuinely afraid of what people would think of her. Was that something that you faced when you first kind of really dealt with it?
Yeah, I think so. I was worried that, I think particularly with anorexia, you feel like you're kind of having to prove a point, and prove that you're well enough to kind of get that support. And actually, I meet a lot of people now who are in hospital who still really struggle with their eating, and they are getting the support they need, but they're not able to kind of follow the programs because they're worrying that as soon as they're a healthy weight, everyone is going to just think that everything's okay and that life is sorted. I think the thing with body image that makes it much harder, and something actually that I've had to really learn myself, particularly over the last year and a half probably, is that I am probably never going to be 100% happy with what I look like, and how I view myself is probably very differently than how other people view me. But I think for me, just accepting that, it helps me to kind of stay on top of those feelings about my body and helps me to kind of feel more confident every day, if that makes sense.
I mean, one of the things I commented to Alex not that long ago, I think you're actually promoting a really good, healthy body image because you're showing that you're exercising and, you're doing everything that you can. I loved your post that you were going to exercise with Dame Kelly Holmes, and it was like, do you know what, that's really good. This is a good way to promote people to lose weight. I mean, just from my own experience, you cover your ears, Alex.
Okay.
When I was younger, I went down the route of not necessarily starving myself, but I would go through the routes of taking appetite suppressants, laxatives, forcing myself to be sick, going down that route. And when I was going through that stage, I was about 15, 16, because I was one of those girls who was just very curvy. I'm always going to be curvy. I can't get away from that. And I went to my doctor at the time because actually what was going on with me was more probably linked with depression, and it was just my way of fighting against the fact that I just didn't like myself very much at all. That's still an ongoing thing, but I kind of went down that route for a very long time and thinking, oh look, I'm this perfect size 10, and still wasn't happy, couldn't find that happiness. And I mean, I know now I'm far too far the other way, but actually within myself I'm much happier. I'd like to be a healthier weight, but I'm happier with me generally. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people are struggling to find. I mean, Do you think the media is playing a part in some of the eating disorders at the moment with how they kind of, I mean, they're airbrushing everybody left, right and centre now. So, I mean, what do you think on that?
So I think it's appalling, actually. I get really frustrated by it. And one of the, I guess one of the issues with that is that people think that it's thin, life is really good and everything's going to be perfect. And, everything's kind of sorted. But the reality is, especially, I know for me, when I got really underweight, when I had anorexia, I was not happy at all, and I would just push myself, and I was never going to get to the weight that made me happy. And so regardless of what shape I am now, I guess it's, you have to kind of.
Sorry, it did break up a second there.
Things in your body that make you happy.
Yeah. I think you've kind of got to get to a point where you make peace with yourself a little bit, which.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we've been discussing recently as well is the fact that it isn't just, people think of any kind of mental health. There's been always this kind of attitude that it's a woman's problem. And I think eating disorders and body dysmorphia and depression and anxiety, it isn't just guys. And how would you go about encouraging more guys to be a bit more open about that?
I think it's very difficult for guys. I think the way that, I do. I think it's hard, particularly with stuff like eating disorders, because it is portrayed like such a feminine thing. But I'd say to try and have those conversations with people around them as a starting point. And actually, if it's a kind of body image issue, then maybe try and get a personal trainer or something to have someone in the gym that you can, I guess, work out with to help you feel better about yourself, and to make sure you're exercising in a healthy way. And also something that I have now around me is people that I trust who, if I get up in the morning and I feel really fat, I can ask them kind of outright, and I know that they'll tell me the honest truth. So as a guy, having those people around you that you trust, whether it's family or friends or kind of partners, I think that's really important as well, so you can have that open dialogue when you're struggling. And actually realising that if you are struggling with food and with your mental health, it's not something to be ashamed of. I know that's really easy for me to say now, but it's not, and it's not a sign of weakness, but actually it's a really strong thing to talk about how you're feeling and to open up and get support when you need it.
It really is, because it's like you two have just said, it's very hard, especially for guys, to talk about these things, because they're not perceived, not portrayed to be anything kind of masculine or manly. You're not supposed to be struggling in that kind of way. And I think I've said it a few times, I've put on a bit of weight, and Cheryl keeps saying, no, you haven't, you're fine. But it's something that a lot of us do struggle with, but it's one of the things that frustrates me, because we're almost conditioned not to talk about it. And the way society is, it's very much that we're almost not believed. I mean, one of my favourite, because I've got a number of pictures that I use about on the website and stuff, and one of my favourites, because I wrote a post aimed specifically for guys and older men and stuff, was that it says, he starves himself, he cuts his wrist, etc., but you don't believe him because he's a guy. And that seems to be very much how it is in the world at the moment. I mean, it's bad enough that these things are portrayed to be kind of, as you said, a more feminine problem, and you don't get believed, but with guys as well. It's one of those things, a lot of people don't seem to believe that people are struggling. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, one thing that sorry, Hope, Sorry, you carry on, Hope.
This means then the more kind of saying that when guys don't feel able to open up, which is why it's so important we keep these conversations going and keep raising awareness about it and keep kind of encouraging people to reach out for support if they are.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've admired that I know that you do, you go into schools quite a lot and talk as well, which I think is really important that people do. And because there is this kind of concept that I've seen and come across, that not even just sort of eating disorders or depression or anything, but this concept that a lot of things that happen like that, so when somebody's got an eating disorder or if they're self-harming, that they're doing it for attention. Something I can remember quite clearly when I was at school, which we won't say how long ago that was,
What you looking at me for?
Was that there was a girl who was in my year, and it was kind of logically everybody knew that she had got an eating disorder. We knew that it was either anorexia or bulimia. Everybody knew, but the assumption was that she was only doing it for attention, for people to look at her. And I don't know how this attitude starts or where it starts, but it's kind of, it's disturbing that kind of pattern comes in. Is that something you've ever sort of seen or experienced yourself?
So I haven't experienced it myself, but actually I've heard a lot of other people who I've met kind of in the last year have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is, I guess it's kind of, it's a hard stigma to break. And I think with mental health problems, sometimes people do say that people are doing it for attention and all of this, but like when people say stuff like that to me, I just completely ignore it because I know that's not true.
Yeah.
And it's important that actually we kind of embrace that and say, actually, we're not doing it for attention, we've got a mental health problem.
Yeah.
And a lot of the problem with eating disorders, I think, is because it's portrayed so physically.
Yeah.
That people then just don't understand that actually there is a mental side of it as well, and it's not about having the perfect body shape and being kind of ideal and looking amazing. That it's so much more to it than that, and it isn't a weight thing. It's about what your brain is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's trying to find that healthy relationship with not just your body, but with food, with yourself, everything. Yeah. I mean, that's, one thing I have said, I've said this numerous times to lots of different people over the years. It's very difficult to find happiness within yourself if your brain is already telling you that you're not good enough one way or another. And it's trying to battle that and break that down isn't helped when people are going, well, you're doing it for attention. And like, I'm not.
One thing we do on Pushing Back the Shadows is we try and support those who are going through the mental health struggles themselves, but also raising awareness for the friends and family as well, and trying to equip them with not necessarily answers, but suggestions for how they can help support somebody who's going through these things. So I've got kind of a two-part question for you. The first part is, what would your advice or recommendation be, or what would you say to somebody who's going through these eating disorders? And then the second part is, what would you say your advice be to the friends and the family members who are trying to support them?
So the first one, if it's anorexia that someone's going through, I'd tell them that you think that voice in your head, the anorexia, is kind of giving you everything you need. It gives you this value and this sense of purpose. But the reality is what it gives you doesn't last for that long, and life is so much better when you're beating that anorexia and actually finding a way to challenge it in a positive way and keeping strong by doing that. And it's 100% worth fighting to get to that point where you can recover. It's really difficult, but you can get to that point where you can go out for dinner and have a really good evening, where you don't get up in the morning and worry about exercise and calories. And getting to that point is definitely worth it, however hard it feels it's going to take. And then I guess with the second one around kind of family and friends, I think it's unbelievably difficult for family and friends to watch someone struggling with an eating disorder. I know that when I was growing up, my parents really struggled with it, because as a parent you feel completely helpless to that person. But I think it's really important to know, I guess, a couple of things. So first of all, make sure that you're making positive memories with that person that is away from food, so doing activities that person enjoys. I also think it's really important to, depending on where that person is within their recovery, to give them some kind of control over the food. So if you're arranging a meal out with all your friends, maybe in recovery choose where you're going to go for dinner, so that they don't feel like they're not able to come because the food's too scary. I also think trying to remove all sort of emotion from food is really important. So something that we do at home is to not sit down for a meal when there's an argument going on, just because as soon as there's kind of any sort of emotion in the food, it can bring back bad memories, and be a way for you to actually show that you're still struggling. And if also, I think as a parent, reassuring your child that kind of whatever they're going through, you're going to be there, whatever they do, whatever happens, and you'll hold their hand through it. And as they put on weight, make sure that they know that you know that they're still not okay, and that they probably are still struggling. post their quick fix just because they started to put the weight on again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. That's really wonderful to hear, because there's some really positive messages there. I mean, just, you know, as I say, when I was growing up, there were a lot of attitudes of, like I say, perfect image, perfect, you know, this is how you... When I was growing up, everybody wanted to look like Cindy Crawford. That's kind of probably before you guys' time, but everybody wanted to look like her. They wanted to have that beautiful, slender figure. And then when Kate Moss came on the scene, everybody wanted to be that super, super skinny. And the reality is that for a lot of girls, we're all different body shapes. It may never happen. But I think, you know, when we look around at some of the things that we see, you know, everywhere you look, there's this pressure for diet foods and sugar-free and this image and that image. And it is quite... I mean, I look at my daughter now, she's only 4. And we try to tell her every day now, not that so much that she's beautiful, because she is beautiful, but we're biased, but that actually that she's clever, that she's mischievous, that she's a monkey and she gets into everything.
Oh, she does.
And try and encourage the inside a little bit more. And I think that's, you know, what you're saying there in helping support somebody through the recovery and being supportive of that person on the inside is actually a really good, powerful message. I mean, one thing, I don't know if you'd agree with this, I think it's something that with all children, we need to start empowering the what's on the inside first and look at the outside later. What do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. Too much emphasis is based on people's appearance nowadays, and it doesn't, like, at the end of the day, it's not about what you look like, it's about what you are like as a person. And I think that's something that we all should actually, even as adults, we should all kind of bear that in mind actually, and realise that we don't need to be kind of the perfect body shape, but as long as we're a good individual, that we're kind of living life well, I think that's the main thing.
Yeah.
And getting children to not think about appearance and focus on that is so, so important.
Yeah, and it is difficult to do that, especially with kids, because I mean, well, just from my own experiences with my daughter and with my son, I mean, I've got a teenager who's 16, and he thinks that he should have a 6-pack. He thinks he should have certain muscles in his arms already. And I think it was about a year ago, I caught him in his bedroom lifting weights obsessively to the point that he was actually hurting himself. And it's like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, I want to get muscles. And it's like, but if you do things like that too soon and too quickly and without the proper support, you're actually going to end up probably damaging yourself more in the long run. And I agree with you. I think we've got to try and get that positive message out there to the kids that let's love you for you, not for what you look like. Yeah. That's fantastic. But thank you for that positive message, because I think a lot of people really need to hear that.
So just as a final note, is there anything else that you wanted to add, anything you wanted to share to the people who are going to be listening to this?
I think something point there, it's really, really difficult to talk about your mental health and how you're feeling, but as soon as you start doing it and as soon as you start sharing and normalising those conversations, like, life gets, and you're kind of empowering not only yourself but other people to get the support when they need it as well.
Excellent.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
And thank you so much for taking... Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. To find out more, head over to pushingbacktheshadows.com and hit subscribe to get all of our latest updates straight to your inbox. Alternatively, connect with us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Alex Davis PBTS, or you can visit us on Twitter at Alex Davis PBTS. Enable Pushing Back the Shadows to continue supporting people in the mental health community, their friends and their family. By pledging just $1 a month, you could help us to continue supporting people with depression, with anxiety, with bipolar and other mental illnesses. You can also unlock exclusive rewards, behind the scenes, sneak previews of upcoming posts, and much, much more. So head over to www.patreon.com/Alex Davis PBTS to find out more.